Chukas. Oh, thank you. Today is not only Parshas Chukas, which I want to begin with, but today is also, as I'm sure all of you know, or many of you know, the 30th yard site of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Gimmel Tammuz. So I would like to speak about Gimmel Tammuz as well. I mean, there's so much inspiration from the Lubavitcher Rebbe's life, and certainly not just as a shliach of the Rebbe, but my own life was so drastically, the whole trajectory of my life was changed by the inspiration of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is a whole shiur in and of itself. I'm not going to talk about my life today. So I want to speak about that as well. But let's start off with Parshas Chukas, because really the main point of today's shiur is I want to speak about the yard side of the Rebbe and sort of the underlying theme of the Rebbe's leadership. There was so much that the Rebbe did and accomplished. And when we think of Chabad, we think of the Chabad houses all over the world. We think of the big menorahs. We think of the mitzvah tanks in Manhattan and the putting on tefillin on Jews and Shabbos candle lights everywhere, and the soldiers being visited by yeshiva bachrim even in war zones, etc. But all of that was done by the Rebbe. I mean, for me, one of the most inspiring things about the Rebbe and his life is just what a single person can accomplish. Is just what how a single person could transform and change the world. The Rebbe's life is a testimony to that. But I really want to speak today more about the sort of underlying theology or philosophy that sprang forth all of those things that I mentioned. The fact that the Rebbe's yard site falls out in Parshas Chukas, some years it falls out in Parshas Kairach, some years it falls out in Parshas Chukas, it's always in this time period. So obviously, like the Shalah, the Shnei Luchos HaBris, the Shalah Kodesh said, whenever you have a Yom Pagra, a special day that falls out on a certain parsha, there's always a thematic connection. Everything is b'hashgacha. And so I think the message of the Rebbe's leadership and sort of the underlying theme of the Rebbe's leadership is certainly alluded to in these parshas as well, and that's what I want to touch upon. So let's begin with Parshas Chukas, and then I'll shift it into the Rebbe. I'm going to share the screen, so I want to touch upon one pasuk here, this pasuk Hey that's on the screen right here, and this is in our parsha, Parshas Chukas, and if you look in Parshas Hey, this is part of the Jewish people, one of their many complaints in the desert. And so the pasuk says, "Vayedaber ha'am be'elokim u'Moshe lama hilisanu mitzrayim lamus b'midbar." Why? So the people spoke against Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did you bring us out of Egypt simply to die in the desert? Ki ein lechem v'ein mayim. We have no bread. We have no water. Which doesn't make any sense. They have the manna, they have the man, and they have the Be'er Shel Miriam. So it's a bizarre statement. Ein ki ein lechem ve'ein mayim. It does not even true. What do they mean? And then they say, when regarding the man, v'nafshenu katza b'lechem ha'klokel, that our souls are disgusted. Katza is like disgusted. Our souls are disgusted by this rotten bread, this lechem ha'kelkel, this rotten bread. That's how they call the man. So this is a bizarre complaint. I mean, just even on a simplistic level, how do we understand this complaint? What are they actually saying? And as we've spoken about many weeks, the Torah could be understood on many levels, not just the superficial level, but even the superficial level. This is certainly hard to understand, and it calls for a deeper understanding. Because ein lechem ve'ein mayim makes no sense. They had the man and they had the Be'er of Miriam. And what's nafshenu katza b'lechem? We're disgusted by the man. Why? Why would they be disgusted by the man? The man was delicious. It tasted like anything you wanted it to taste like. It was the perfect bread, the perfect food. So look what Rashi says, a fascinating Rashi. Why are they disgusted by the man? And says Rashi, just the last words of Rashi. Klum yesh yilud isha shemachnis ve'ena. So Rashi explains, let's look at the beginning of Rashi. Lefi shaman nivla be'ivarim karuhu kilko, because the man was totally absorbed into their bodies. In other words, normally they had the experience when they ate food, part of the food, the nutritious part of the food, was absorbed into their bodies, and the waste products the body let out through the waste, But in the case of the man was totally absorbed. So they felt, since we're not letting this man out, there's no waste, perhaps it will one day explode in our bellies. The klum, and then this is the final statement, which we started with, klum yesh yilud isha. There is no human being, they say, that could be machnis ve'inomaitzi, that could take in, on the simple levels, to take in food and not give out any waste. So there's no human being that is machnis ve'inomaitzi, that only absorbs and doesn't give out. And that's their problem with the man. So obviously, we need to understand this on a deeper level. What does it mean there is no bread and no water? What does it mean that they have this complaint about the man? And the Chassam Sefer points out something interesting, that if we go back to our pasuk for a second, let's go back to it for 1 second. We go back to our pasuk for a second. Says the Chassam Sefer, look at the last words of pasuk Hey. Nafshenu katsa belechem hakelkel. When they speak about the man, and that they don't want the man because they're only machnis ve'inomaitzi, they're only absorbing and not giving out. What is look at the acronym or the Rosh Tevis. Nafshenu katsa belechem hakelkel is acronym Nakeva, which means female. What does that have to do with anything? Says the Chassam Sefer, that is in fact very relevant. So how do we understand this? How do we understand this particular complaint? What is it exactly that they're complaining about? So I want to share with you this Chassam Sefer, and it's brought in the Sari Alafim as well. And he gives a fascinating insight. And it's based really, let's go back a little bit, go back in time a little bit, to the Yom Tov of Pesach and to the Haggadah. And in the beginning of the Haggadah, the Chassam Sefer asks a question. And this is a question that many commentaries on the Haggadah ask about the Heilach Ma'anya. The Heilach Ma'anya seems to have 3 distinct clauses that have no relationship to each other at all. And obviously they're together in the Heilach Ma'anya, there's an intrinsic connection. But he says, if you take a look at the second clause and the third clause, the second clause is, Kal dichvin yesev yechel, kal ditzrich yesev yitzach, whoever's hungry, come and eat. Whoever needs to celebrate the Pesach Seder, come and celebrate Pesach. And then the third clause is, now we're here, now we're here, but soon Mashiach is going to come and we're going to be in the land of Israel. What does that have to do? Now we're here and soon we'll be in Israel. What does that have to do with the third clause? What does that have to do with the second clause? Whoever's hungry, come and eat. Why are these put together? So says the Chassam Sefer, a beautiful, beautiful pshat. He says what it's saying is like this, that when Mashiach comes, there will be no more tzedakah, the mitzvah of tzedakah will no longer exist, because everybody will have everything that they need. There will no longer be poverty. There will no longer be ill health. There will no longer be any need for the mitzvah of tzedakah. So therefore, we're saying at the Pesach Seder, Chaparine, quickly take advantage of the opportunity to do tzedakah now, to have the schus of the mitzvah of tzedakah. Because when Mashiach comes, there will not be an opportunity for tzedakah. Maybe tzedakah baruchnius, that you'll be able to teach people Torah when Mashiach comes. Even that's not the case, because when Mashiach comes, says the Rambam, Mali haaretz dea es Hashem, kamayim liyam lechasim, that the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem like the water fills the ocean. So there won't be any opportunity for physical tzedakah. There won't be any opportunity for spiritual tzedakah when Mashiach comes. So therefore, call dichvin yesev yechel. Whoever needs physical sustenance, come. I want to have the mitzvah of tzedakah while I still have the opportunity. But call ditzrich, and whoever needs spiritual tzedakah, whoever needs to be influenced by the godliness of Pesach, whoever needs Pesach Seder, come and partake in the Pesach Seder. Why? because now we're here, but soon we're going to be in the Messianic era. And in the Messianic era, there won't be that opportunity to influence others in that positive way, to have that tzedakah, to be able to give that tzedakah. And that's really, and why do we begin the Pesach Seder with that? Because Pesach celebrates the freedom of Klal Yisrael, the freedom from tyranny, the freedom from slavery. And what does freedom mean to a Jew? Freedom means not just simply I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm free to live according to the dictates of my godly soul, according to the mandates of what my godly soul yearns for. And what does every godly soul yearn for? To fulfill the will of Hashem. And what is the will of Hashem? To utilize the gifts, the talents, the abilities that Hashem gave me, so that my life will have an positive influence on the world around me and on other human beings. That is the entire purpose of creation, that we should make this world a godly place, utilizing our talents to make the world better, to influence others. And so this is how we begin the Pesach Seder. That called Dichvin Yesav Yecha, whoever's hungry, come and eat. I want to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah. I want to bring people to the Pesach Seder because now I have this opportunity, because this is truly what freedom is. And when Mashiach comes, we'll be on a whole new plane, and we won't have the opportunity to affect others in that positive way. It's similar to in Perek Beis in Pirkei Avos. There's a mission in Perek Beis in Pirkei Avos that says, "Im l'madata Torah harbe." If you learn a lot of Torah, al harbe teva atzmacha. Don't hold yourself as being so great, ki lakach nitzarta, because that's what you were created for. And that's the simple understanding. But the Medrash Shmuel, who's one of the main commentators on Pirkei Avos, gives a deeper understanding. And he says, Im l'madata Torah harbe, if you learn a lot of Torah, don't hold that goodness for yourself. The simple pshat is don't hold so highly of yourself, but the literal words mean, the literal translation is don't hold on to that goodness for yourself. If you learn a lot of Torah, you have to share that with others. You have to influence others. That's what you were created for. Every one of our souls was created to have influence on others. And we fulfill our true purpose in creation when my life makes a difference in the lives of others. That's what our souls ultimately desire. That's what it means in Pirkei Avos. If you learn a lot of Torah, don't hold it in. Influence others, give to others. And this is perhaps what the complaint was in the Midbar. You see, in the Midbar, it was similar to the Messianic era. In the Midbar, everybody had everything that they need. So when the Jews are complaining, don't forget, Parshas Chukas is towards the end of the 40-year period of the Midbar. They've gone through this 40-year period. And this 40-year period, they've been sustained miraculously. And everybody has everything that they need. Not only everything that they need physically, but even everything that they need spiritually. Everybody was there at Har Sinai. Everybody learned the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the complaint here in Parshas Chukas is, Ein lechem ve'ein mayim. It's not that they don't have physical bread and water. It's that we don't have the ability to be mashpia. We don't have the ability to influence others with physical bread. And mayim, ein mayim ela Torah. Mayim is a euphemism for Torah. We don't have the ability to give physical tzedakah, to give spiritual tzedakah. We don't have the ability to influence others. This was their complaint. This is what we were created for. This is what we want. So instead of being a negative complaint, it's fascinating. The Psalm Sefer turns it around, and they're saying, we want to be mashpia. We want to be influential. You know, in Kabbalah and in other places, the male-female dynamic is one of mashpia and makabel, where the male is mashpia, the male influences gifts, and the female receives. For example, the example that's given is the male brings home the unrefined stalk of wheat, and the female receives that and turns it into bread. And similarly, in the creation of a child, the male is mashpia, the male gives the seed, and the female receives that in the gestation process. The child is created. So the male is mashpia and the female is makabel. But that's the male-female dynamic. But in terms of how what our effect is meant to be on the world, both male and female souls have a desire to be mashpia, to influence the world, not just to be a recipient of blessings, but to influence others. And that's why when they speak about the man and they say nafshenu kotza, that our souls are disgusted belechem akelkel. It's Rasha Tevis Nekeva. They're alluding to this fact that they are only recipients. They want to influence others. And this was their complaint, as the Chassam Sefer understands. It's such a beautiful, beautiful lens to see something negative, their complaint, and actually transform it and see that the Jews wanted to fulfill their mandate. They wanted to influence others. And I think it's a beautiful explanation by the Chassam Sefer, but this explanation, I think, so beautifully describes the Rebbe's life. And perhaps this is why Gimmel Tammuz falls under in Parshas Chukas. Because from, like I said, all of the things that the Lubavitcher Rebbe accomplished, the shluchim and the Chabad houses and the Torah that he taught and the big menorahs and the mitzvah tanks and all of the mifsoyim and the campaigns and the spreading of Judaism, what is the underlying theology behind it all? And I want to share with you a few stories. And these stories, when it comes to Rebbe stories, I want to tell you the ones that particularly speak to me is not the miracle stories. There's lots of miracle stories with the Rebbe, but those aren't the stories that particularly light my soul on fire. It's the stories that exemplify everything the Rebbe stood for. One of my favorite stories, this wasn't even what I was planning on telling today, but is when a group of college students, I think this is in the late 1960s, a group of college students came into the secular college students. They were having a pagisha, which they used to have in Crown Heights, they still do, where they would bring in college students from all over the world for a Shabbaton. And one of the highlights is they would bring these students into yechidus, into an individual audience with the Rebbe, or at least a group of them in an audience with the Rebbe. And these were secular students, so their connection to what a Rebbe is, etc. They had a certain idea. So one of them, in one of these yechidus, and one of the students asked the Rebbe, he heard that the Rebbe does miracles, so he'd like the Rebbe to perform a miracle. And that's what he said to the Rebbe. So, obviously that's not how a chassid would speak to a Rebbe. That's a little bit chutzpah, but okay, this is a secular college student. So he asked the Rebbe to perform a miracle. So the Rebbe said, okay, he's going to perform a miracle. And the Rebbe says, this is the miracle. Every single one of you here, it was a group of students, I don't know how many, 10, 11, 12, whatever it was. Every single one of you here has something within yourself that you've been trying to improve. A character trait that you've been trying to improve that you've struggled with. The miracle is that every one of you here is going to come out of my office, is going to leave this pagisha and leave the Shabbaton, and you're going to continue to battle that negative character trait that you're trying to elevate, that you're trying to refine, that you're trying to better, and every one of you is going to be successful. That's my miracle. And I love that story so much because it personified exactly what the Rebbe's mission was in life, was to elevate others, to elevate the world around us. But through what lenses? Why was that? What was the theology behind it? So I want to share with you two stories that I heard from Rabbi Alter Bucket, who's a shliach in Massachusetts, and he tells this story that that happened in his Chabad house. I don't know how many years ago this was, but he has a Chabad house, and like many Chabad houses, it is filled primarily with non-religious Jews because it's not in a religious community. I forgot where he is in Massachusetts, Lexington, I think, or something like that in Massachusetts. So one Shabbos, he's having a bas mitzvah there. A bas mitzvah, and he has 200 people, he says. And they're not religious people. And he says he's trying to make the service inside, and outside in the parking lot, it's freilich, and they're taking pictures, and they have a photographer, and all this is taking place in the parking lot, and he's trying to have the services inside. And he sees amongst all this hubbaloo, this big bas mitzvah party, he sees this Hasidish guy who he normally does not see in Lexington, Massachusetts, but apparently there's a hospital 6 miles from him, And this Chassidish guy was in the hospital visiting his father over Shabbos, and he wanted to hear Kriyas HaTorah. So he decided he's going to walk 6 miles to hear Kriyas HaTorah in Rabbi Buket's Chabad house. So Rabbi Buket sees this guy coming, and he sees the parking lot and the pictures being taken, and this whole taram in the parking lot. It's not very Shabbos. It's not like Shabbos in Williamsburg. So he's thinking, oh, what is this chassid? He's not going to understand what's going on. And then he comes inside, and inside in the shul, again, Chabad does things that perhaps other Hasidic groups wouldn't do. The Bas Mitzvah girl spoke from the pulpit, which again, there's nothing wrong with that in halacha, but it wouldn't happen in Williamsburg or Borough Park or wherever this Hasidic guy came from. And so this Rabbi Buket is feeling very uncomfortable for him, that he must be very uncomfortable. Finally, davening is over, and he figures this Hasidic guy must be starving, hungry. But he's not going to want to sit down at the Kiddush, at the Bas Mitzvah Kiddush with everybody and hear the mother speak and the grandmother speak. So Rabbi Buket goes over to him and he says, listen, I'm so sorry, it's Bas Mitzvah today, and that's why everything is happening. And, if you want, I'll walk you to my house and you can have a private meal by yourself. And the chassid says, no, I want to sit by the Bas Mitzvah and eat with everybody else. Okay. So so finally the father speaks and the mother speaks and the bubby speaks and grandma speaks, everybody speaks. And finally everybody goes home. Bas Mitzvah is over, and this Rabbi Buket says, I'm exhausted. And the chassid turns to me and he says, this Rabbi Buket's telling a story. He says, the chassid turns to me and he says, I'm disappointed in you. Okay, so Rabbi Buket was waiting for this. He knows that the chassid wasn't used to people taking pictures in the parking lot and the girls, the Bas Mitzvah girls speaking from the pulpit. But that's not what the chassid said. So Rabbi Buket said, why are you disappointed in me? He said, I'm disappointed in you that you were apologetic when you approached me about the Bas Mitzvah, that you were apologetic. You approached me, why are you apologetic? He said, you're doing God's work. You're doing the Rebbe's work. You have nothing to apologize for. Sometimes there's an expression in Yiddish that a guest for a while could see a mile. That it took the guest to sort of imbue within him. Why? I have nothing to apologize for. He said, I thought you were uncomfortable. He says, why should I be uncomfortable? Why should I be uncomfortable? He says the entire Jewish world, and he means the Hasidic world, the ultra-Orthodox world, the entire Jewish world wants to keep Judaism in a cocoon. And they think that Judaism will survive in a cocoon, and that's the only way to make Judaism survive. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, no, take it out of the cocoon and bring Judaism to the world and bring it to the masses and bring it to everyone. And you're doing that work. So who cares if I'm uncomfortable? You're doing Hashem's work, because the only way Judaism will survive is bringing it to the world and bringing it to the masses of Jews. And that's exactly what the Rebbe understood. This was a Kleisenberger chassid who's telling this to a Chabad Shliach. Fascinating. So this Rabbi Buket took the Musar. He said he's of course he's correct. But the question is, why is that? What made the Rebbe different? That he wanted to take Judaism out of the cocoon, out of the self-imposed ghettos, and bring it to the masses. What was the underlying sort of theology and philosophy of the Rebbe? And it was the lenses, I believe, through which the Rebbe saw the world. So I want to share with you another story. And this is a story, it's told by a man named Yosef Binyamin Williger. And this Yosef Binyamin Williger, fascinating story with this Yosef Binyamin Williger. He was a Munkacher chassid during World War II. And the Munkacher Rebbe passed away. The new Rebbe, his son, ended up going to Eretz Yisrael, took off his beard, sort of left the Hasidic fold, the Munkacher Rebbe. And so the Munkacher Chassidim didn't really have anywhere to, they had to find a new Rebbe. And this Yosef Binyamin Williger became very close, moved to America and became very close to the Kleisenberger Rebbe. The Kleisenberger Rebbe himself was an incredible Jew. Yukasiel Halberstam was his name. And he survived the Holocaust. He was beaten in the Holocaust, tortured in the Holocaust, lost everything, lost his wife. He had, I forgot how many, 11 or 12 children, lost them all in the Holocaust, lost all of his Hasidim in the Holocaust, literally survived himself, came out with nothing. remarried, had children, rebuilt his Hasidim, and just an incredibly, incredibly inspiring human being, the Klausenberg Rebbe. He's worth learning about in and of himself. Anyway, so this Yosef Binyamin Williger became very close to the Klausenberg Rebbe. And in 1948, he became engaged to get married. And the Klausenberg Rebbe sent him to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which at that time was the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, sent him to the Rebbe's, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe for a bracha before his chasana. And this Yosef Binyamin Williger went to the previous Rebbe, got a bracha. And at that bracha, the previous Rebbe told him, go downstairs and meet my son-in-law, who would become the future Rebbe eventually. He says, I think that you'll enjoy him and you'll retain a connection with him because you'll enjoy that connection. And he did. He went downstairs and he told the Rebbe what the previous Rebbe said. And as soon as the Rebbe was very, very connected to his father-in-law and very close to his father-in-law, and as soon as he heard that his father-in-law said that, he developed this relationship with this Yosef Binyamin Williger, and they would see Yosef Binyamin Williger would come time to time to see the Rebbe. Okay, fast forward to the early 1960s. The Klausenberger Rebbe, when he was in the concentration camps, because he was tall and strong, a young man, his job was to bury Jews. That was the job they gave him, to bury the Jews that died. And obviously, you can imagine what a rough job that is. And so the Klausenberger decided right then and there, he made a hachlata resolution that if God should somehow save him from the Holocaust, from this concentration camp, and he gets out, that he will build a hospital that will heal Jews. That's his resolution. So now it's 1960s, early 1960s, and this is very much on the Klausenberger Rebbe's mind. And this Yosef Binyamin Williger was sort of like the foreign minister for the Klausenberger Rebbe. He spoke English. He went into business. So whenever the Klausenberger had to deal with sort of worldly subjects, government officials, architects, whatever it was, this Yosef Binyamin Williger was sort of his right-hand man. And they raised the money, the Rebbe and this Yosef Binyamin Williger raised the money for the hospital, and they hired architects to design the hospital. And at some point, this Yosef Binyamin Williger comes into the Klausenberger Rebbe, and he brings the tube, you know how the blueprints come in a tube. He brings the blueprints because he wants the Klausenberger Rebbe's okay. And the Klausenberger Rebbe says, he says, put him back in the tube. I don't even know what I'm looking at. I don't understand what I'm looking at. Take them to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and see what the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives. If the Lubavitcher Rebbe gives his bracha on it, then we'll give it the okay. Why he thought the Lubavitcher Rebbe would understand architectural designs, I don't know, but this was his instruction to Yosef Binyamin Williger. Now, this conversation was taking place 11:30 at night, so he tells Yosef Binyamin Williger, go to the Rebbe. So he says, now? He says, yeah, go now. He says, how am I going to get into Yechidus now? He says, I'll make sure you get in. Klausenberg and Lubavitch were very close, so sure enough, the Rebbe's secretary, the Klausenberg Rebbe's secretary, called the Rebbe's secretary, and they were waiting for this Yosef Binyamin Williger. As soon as he came to 770, he went into Yechidus with the Rebbe. And he showed the Rebbe these there was like, I don't know, a bunch of pages of architectural designs. And the Rebbe's flipping through the architectural design, just like this, just like, looking through each page, not quick, but not slow, just like this. And he closes the book and he tells this Yosef Binyamin Williger, I would make 3 changes. The first change I would make is I would not call it a Beis Chelim. I would call it a Beis Reifin. Don't call it a Beis Chelim, which is what a hospital is called, a house of sickness. Call it a house of healing. It's the Rebbe's psychology, which is a whole topic in and of itself, and a whole farbrengen in and of itself. The Rebbe's look on being positive and positivity and how that affects our lives, and that's a whole branch I don't want to go into right now because I'm just run out of time. But change number 1 was change the name of the hospital to a house of healing, Beis Reifin. Number 2, says the Rebbe, that if I'm not mistaken, the front door of the hospital should be flipped around to the other side of the building. Because if I'm not mistaken, says the Rebbe, I believe you have the front door on a one-way street, and if it were flipped around to the other side of the building, it would be on a two-way street, which would make much more sense. How the Rebbe got this from those architectural, I don't know, but I'm just repeating the story as this Yosef Binyamin repeats it. And then number 3, the Rebbe tells him, you're not looking forward enough into the future. So what does that mean? We're not looking forward enough into the future. The Rebbe says the future of hospitals is a hospital on wheels, not just an ambulance, but a whole intensive care and capacities to do surgery on wheels so you can take it to the people who are sick who don't have time to get to the hospital. So we should make those changes. In addition to the hospital, raise enough money to also create a hospital on wheels, flip the front door to the other side, and change the name. Okay? So Yezim Yama Williger puts the architectural plans back in the tube and he gets up to leave. And the Rebbe tells him, Yosef Yaman, is that all? You came to speak to me about architecture? Am I an architect? Let's talk in Torah. Let's talk in Yiddishkeit. Let's talk in learning. And so this Yosef Yaman is a little bit stunned, like he should talk in learning to the Rebbe. He's silent. So the Rebbe begins. And the Rebbe asks him, does the Klausenberger Rebbe give a drasha on Shabbos? So Yosef Yaman says, yeah, gives a drasha every Shabbos. So the Rebbe says, when? So Yosef Yaman says, before Kriyas HaTorah. So the Rebbe says, before Kriyas HaTorah? How could that be? Divrei Adam Kaidmin LeDivrei Havaya? Can the words of man precede the words of Hashem? The Torah is the words of Hashem. How could a person speak before Kriyas HaTorah? So the Yosef Yaman Williger is stunned. He doesn't know what to say. He says, I don't know. So the Rebbe says, ask the Rebbe, ask the Klausenberger Rebbe, and I want to hear his answer. I want you to tell me his answer. Let me know what his answer is. So this Yosef Yaman Williger feels embarrassed. He's going to ask the Klausenberger Rebbe a question on his practice, but he has to go back to the Klausenberger to say the other three changes that the Rebbe made. So the next day he goes into the Klausenberger Rebbe, and he tells the Klausenberger Rebbe the three things the Rebbe: change the name of the hospital, change the front door, and make the hospital on wheels. And that's all he says. And the Klausenberger Rebbe says, Yosef ben Yamin, is that all the Rebbe said to you? It's fascinating, this conversation between Rebbes here that is about to take place with this Yosef ben Yamin in the middle. He says, is that all the Rebbe said to you? So Yosef ben Yamin didn't know what to say because he didn't want to say the rest, that the Rebbe questioned his talking before Kriyas HaTorah. He was embarrassed to say that to the Rebbe. He didn't want to insult the Rebbe. So he said, so the Klausenberger said, I know the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I know he must have asked you, let's speak in learning. So what did he speak about? So now Yosef Yaman has no choice. So he tells him, the Rebbe asked, do you speak before Kriyas HaTorah? And I said, yes. And the Rebbe asked, Divrei Adam Kaidmin LeDivrei Havaya, can the words of man precede the words of Hashem? Asked the Klausenberger Rebbe how he could speak before Kriyas HaTorah. And he says the Klausenberger's face, all the blood drained out. He went white. And first he said, I'm not the only one. The Chassam Sefer, the Chazon Ish, the Chacham Tzvi, all speak before Kriyas HaTorah. But then he said the Klausenberger Rebbe said something that stuck with him to this day, he says, when he's told this story. Now he's passed away, he says, but he says, it stuck with me to this day. He said, the Klausenberger Rebbe said, "For was stupte mir in Wand?" Why is the Lubavitcher Rebbe pushing me against the wall and making me say something that he wants me to say? And this Yosef ben Yamin Williger has no idea what he's talking about. And he's just sitting there silently. And he realizes that's it. The Klausenberger is not saying anything more, and so he leaves. But he doesn't have an answer for the Rebbe. What is he going to tell the Rebbe? The Rebbe's waiting for an answer. The Klausenberger Rebbe didn't give an answer. He just said, why is the Lubavitcher Rebbe pushing me against the wall? So he doesn't go back to the Rebbe because he doesn't really have an answer for the Rebbe, and he's uncomfortable with the whole conversation. He says, anyway, so 2 days go by, and the Rebbe's secretary calls him, Label Groner, Rabbi Label Groner. He says, no, Yosef ben Yamin. The Rebbe's waiting for an answer from the Klausenberger. Does the Klausenberger have an answer? And he's so uncomfortable. He doesn't know what to say. So he just says, what happened? He says, I told the Klausenberger what the Rebbe said. And the Klausenberger said, why is he pushing me against the wall, making me say something that he wants me to say? And a day later, Rabbi Groner went and told this to the Rebbe. And a day later, he called back Yosef ben Yamin Williger, and he told him the Rebbe's response to that was, a kluger yid. He's a clever Jew. And Yosef ben Yamin Williger, who tells this story, says, I had no idea This was clearly two spiritual giants who were talking, having a conversation. And he says, I felt like the volleyball in between these two spiritual giants who were having a conversation way above my head and using me to communicate to each other. I had no idea what they're talking about. He said, but perhaps, if I can give my own, after I thought about it for a little while, if I can give my own explanation as to what was going on between the Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Klausenberger Rebbe. He says, you see, the Lubavitcher Rebbe saw the world through one lens, the value, the preciousness, the beauty, and the splendor of the Jewish soul. How powerful, how profound the Jewish soul is. And it doesn't matter levels of observance. It doesn't matter Orthodox, Reform, Conservative. There are no labels. There's a Yiddish and a Shema, and that's it. And he saw the entire world and his entire life and his entire mission through the lenses of the preciousness of a Jewish soul. And the paradigm of the other sort of the Orthodox world at that time, the ultra-Orthodox world, was seen through the paradigm of observance. More observance is correct, less observance is less correct. And it's not that that's not true. It's not that there's not some truth to that. Obviously, observance is the point in the tachlis, but that's not how we view the value of the soul. We don't view the value of a soul through how observant they are. The value of a soul is infinite and precious, whether it belongs to Moshe Rabbeinu or Chaim Yankel, who never did a mitzvah in his life. Both of their souls are equally precious and valuable. And that's how the Rebbe saw the world. And therefore, that's how the Rebbe saw the interconnectivity, that because all of us have that soul. And that's how the Rebbe saw that we're all responsible. Call Yisrael a Ravim, that we're all responsible for one another. We're all interconnected. And this, he says this Yosef ben Yamin, he says, this is what the Rebbe was trying to get the Klausenberger to say. Because how could the Klausenberger speak? How could Divrei Adam be Kaimin L'Divrei Havaya? You could speak before Kriyas Torah, as the Klausenberger himself said. He's not the only one who did that. The Chacham Tzvi did it. The Chassam Sefer did it. The Chazon Ish did it. Why? Why can a Jew speak before Kriyas Torah? Because where a Jewish soul is rooted in the celestial realms is even higher than where Torah is rooted. That there's nothing loftier than a Jewish soul. So a Jewish soul can speak before Torah. But for the Rebbe, it wasn't just enough that he saw the world through these lenses. He wanted the Klausenberger to see the world through these lenses. He wanted the Klausenberger to say those words. The reason why Divrei Adam could be Kedem Divrei Havaya, the reason why I can speak before Kriyas Torah is because of the infinite value and preciousness of a Jewish soul. And he wanted the Klausenberger to say those words, but that wasn't the Klausenberger's paradigm. And so the Klausenberger understood what the Rebbe wanted. And that's why he says, why is he pushing me against the wall and making me say something that he wants me to say? And that's why when he reported those words, the Rebbe said, a kluger Yid, a clever Jew, a brilliant Jew. He understood exactly what my intent was. And I love this story so much because it's not a miracle story, but the story underlines and emphasizes the lenses through which the Lubavitcher Rebbe transformed and changed the world. And it's the message of our Parshas Chukas, the value of a Jewish soul, the preciousness of every single Jew, no matter who they are and where they are. And our job, our souls yearn to feel that interconnectivity and therefore influence one another positively. As we learned in our Parsha, this was the complaint of the Jews in the Midbar. And this is why the Rebbe's yahrzeit falls down in Parshas Chukas, because this was the message of the Rebbe. This was the underlying theology of the Rebbe. But for the Rebbe, he wanted the other. It wasn't enough that it was his philosophy. He wanted the Klausenberger to see it. He wanted the Satmar to see it. He wanted the Bells to see it. He wanted the world to see the world through those lenses. And this is why I think the Rebbe's main mission was to, as the Rebbe himself said, that the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, searched out every single Jew with hate. And therefore, the rectification of that, our job, and this includes the modern day Nazis, Yimach Shemam, and our job, therefore, is to search every single Jew through love. And this was the Rebbe's mission, to find every single Jew through the medium of love. there's the Rosh Hashiva of Mir, the old Rosh Hashiva of Mir in Shanghai, when the Mir had to escape Nazi Germany, and they went to Shanghai. The Rosh Hashiva was Chaim Shmulevitz, and Chaim Shmulevitz had one of the most brilliant Talmud in the yeshiva then. His name was Nachum Partzovitz, and Chaim Shmulevitz took Nachum Partzovitz as a son-in-law. And today, Nachum Parsovitz's son is the Rosh Hashiva of Mir today. And this Nachum Parsovitz, who was from the Misnagdisha world, from not the Hasidic world, from the yeshiva world, he was the son-in-law of Chaim Shmulevitz. He was a Maggid Shiur in the Mir. He had, I think, a health issue with one of his children, and secretly, clandestinely, he would meet with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And at one point, I think he had a 2.5-hour yechidus, he and his wife with the Rebbe. And when he came out of that yechidus, he told the Hasidim who were around there, because the 2.5-hour yechidus was completely abnormal. That was a very, very long yechidus. And he said the Rebbe walked him through Jewish history and how every tekufa in Jewish history needed, every period in Jewish history needed a certain approach to inspire the Jews and to bring the Jews to life and to bring Mashiach in that generation. And he says there was a time when perhaps Musar was the approach. But today, he tried to explain this, Nachum Partzovitz, today the approach is love, is Ava. That's what we need today. That's what Klal Yisrael needs today. This was in the late 1960s, this Yechidus with Nachum Partzovitz. But how much, here we are 50, 55 years later, however long it is since that Yechidus, we're still in that generation that needs love. That's the lenses through which the Rebbe saw the Jewish world, through the preciousness of the Jewish soul. And it was through those lenses that he transformed the world. And I think on today, on a yard side of anybody, is the day when that person's energies and everything they lived for and everything all of their passion emanates into the world. This applies to everybody, our grandparents, our parents, etc. How much more so a Rebbe, a Rosh B'nai Yisrael, a Tzaddik, whose yard site is today, the amount of brachas that come into the world today on the Tzaddik's yard site. And our job is to make ourselves a vessel for those brachas. And the way that we could do that is to imbue that message of the Rebbe. Somebody, a common question that people ask, and I'm just going to conclude with this because I'm running out of time. A common question that people ask about the Rebbe is, why didn't the Rebbe appoint a successor? Right? Because it left Lubavitch without a Rebbe. Why didn't the Rebbe appoint a successor? And I want to argue that the Rebbe did appoint a successor. If you learn the Rebbe's Torahs, the Rebbe clearly appointed a successor. The successor is you. We are the successor. We are the ones who were meant to finish in carrying out the final mission of the Rebbe, of searching for every single Jew in love, of feeling that interconnectivity between every single Jew. Doesn't matter. He wears a black yarmulke, he wears a white yarmulke, he wears an up hat, he doesn't wear a hat at all. The Rebbe didn't see any of that. The Rebbe saw a Jewish soul and yearned that every one of us should utilize whatever influence we have to bring positivity to somebody else. That was the Rebbe's mission, because that was the lenses through which the Rebbe saw the world. So Amir Tzashem, every one of us on this holy day of Gimmel Tammuz, on this powerful, profound day of Kedusha, will take upon ourselves to be that successor, to bring our influence, to utilize our influence, not just live for ourselves, but to utilize whatever influence we have to bring physical goodness, spiritual goodness, to help another Jew, to help another human being, to utilize our influence to make a difference in the lives of others. And when we do that, that will be the final step. Then we will all be able to ultimately bring about the culmination of all of the Rebbe's work and all of the Rebbe's leadership, which is the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mheira V'Yameinu. Amen. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for this class / Gimmel Tammuz for Brengen. I hope you enjoyed it. And Amir Tzashem, I will be back next week in person. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Yasha,
oh, let's do Tehillim. Let's do our Tehillim as we do every week. Let's do Tehillim 121. So we will say Tehillim together on behalf of, or in the schus of Achenu v'Achiseinu, the Eretz Yisrael, and wherever they may be, and of course our Tzahal, our heroes, and of course our those who are held captive should be our hostages should be let free, and we should all be reunited with them together. Take it from Miyad Mamish. So let's say Tehillim together. 121. Shir Lamalois Esei Lai Harimi Ayin Yaboy Ezri. Ezri me'im adinoi oisei shemayim bi'aretz. Ayitin l'moit raglecha al yanim shemrecha. Hinei l'yanim li'ishan shema Yisrael. Adinoi shemrecha adonai ticha al yad yaminecha. Yom HaShemesh le'yakacha v'yareach b'layla. Adinoi yishmarcha michara, yishmer es nafshecha. Adinoi yishmer tzescha v'yecha mi'ata v'yad ulam. Thank you so much, everybody. Amir Tashem. We'll see everybody next week in person. Take care. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much. Beautiful Torah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Feel better.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.